There's hot sauce on the pot stocks today, and if you've been listening to Charlie, you know why. A report in the Washington Post getting us back around this idea of President Trump warming up to weed. Must have got a call from Roger Stone. Trump seeks to cut restrictions on marijuana through planned order. This is rescheduling we're talking about here, and it's something that a lot of folks expected during the campaign. Maybe not so much after the president took office. This is, by the way, an idea that was pursued by the Biden administration. Never ended up happening, as the president now is expected to direct agencies to reclassify marijuana as a Schedule III drug, similar to common painkillers. It is currently in the same class as heroin. And this would not legalize marijuana, but it would allow cannabis companies to see the light of day and potentially use a bank. Would also mean a different tax status, and that's why we're seeing these stocks take off. We thought we'd dial up Nathan Dean to get his take on this. Of course, at Bloomberg Intelligence, our senior U.S. policy analyst who's fielding calls on this all the time because, as you can tell us, Nathan, welcome back, cannabis investors are passionate and very active, and they have been waiting for good news for a long time. But Lucy keeps pulling the football. Is this actually going to happen?
You know, that's the number one question we got this morning from the clients is this for real now? And what we're telling our clients is that, look, you know, yes, these equities have hot sauce, lots of volatility. MSOS is up 38%. But really, I think what we need to do is see what happens with this order, because the president does not have the authority to unilaterally reclassify it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. What I think the order is going to say is that it's going to direct the Department of Justice and the DEA to restart this process of a rulemaking change. Now, they're about 70% of the way through, so, I mean, obviously it's not going to be that long. But if the DOJ comes out and says, right, we're going to do this on a speedier method, meaning we're going to forego a hearing, we're just going to move straight to the rulemaking process, they can get this done by the first half of next year. The question, though, is what is going to be in that order? Because obviously, if that order just says I'm going to deem it valid and therefore it's Schedule 3 today, then that's going to have court challenges and uncertainty still reigns.
What's the DEA think about this? Because I thought the tension was coming from within the administration last time we spoke.
Yeah, and it still is. I mean, so obviously we've heard anecdotally that the DEA is not, the staff there is not really on board with this idea. That was prevalent during the Biden administration. We saw no reason why it would change under the Trump administration. In fact, the administrator of the DEA, Terrence Cole, has a 30-year history of fighting marijuana, and he didn't really seem to be that on board with the idea. You know, the Washington Post report even talks about how Speaker Johnson tried to rebut some of President Trump's arguments here. So what we're telling our clients is that, look, even if reschedulization goes forward, it's not legalization. It doesn't lead to increased market share for these companies. What it does is it changes the tax code, something called 280E. So rather than paying a 40% tax rate, you're down to around 10 to 15%. So that's obviously good for those companies. But, you know, this resistance still remains. And that's why we're at a 30% chance of legalization. And that is what would prohibit market share growth, organic growth, everything like that. This is really just about tax.
Okay. This is good to understand and not to conflate with the Safe Banking Act, right? Was I correct about that? Or these companies would still not be able to use banking services?
That's correct. I mean, under the Safer Banking Act, banks would be able to service marijuana businesses. But our theory on that is until it's legislatively changed at the federal level, meaning until the drug is federally legalized, banks, especially the big banks, the publicly traded banks, they're not going to touch marijuana because you're going to be afraid of running into the Bank Secrecy Act or anti-money laundering. And honestly, the revenues just isn't there for the risk. So for these companies, there's two things for market participants to keep in mind. One is the tax issue, and the second is there's a lot of retail sentiment in this hot sauce right now. If you look at the Canadian pot equities, they're also up 30%, and this largely doesn't apply to them. So there's a lot of folks out here saying, you know what, this is good, but just keep in mind there's a lot of retail sentiment here as well.
Well, and that's important because you pointed out MSOS, that's the Advisor Shares Pure U.S. Cannabis ETF, because a lot of these other ETFs fold in, to your point, Canadian companies, right, or tobacco companies, a lot of different grow companies. I think you find a lot of different stuff that you might not expect, for instance, in the MJ ETF. Is this what your clients are looking at? Is this what our audience should be tracking?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, what the reschedulation does is that it really opens up the mom and pop aspect for marijuana.
Hmm.
So think of like the mom and pop farms in Oklahoma and Colorado and so forth. Those are the businesses that this is really geared towards. Now, the reason why positive for the bigger companies is because we do anticipate that there's going to be significant consolidation in this industry as incrementally things get better and better and better in terms of the legality of the drug. This is not an easy business to be in right now. And so as you know, you get more of a regulatory framework, usually it's the big players that gobble up the smaller players, and then they are the ones that have the technology spend, the compliance spend, the legal spend that can deal with these regulations. So if President Trump does reclassify this, let's just say middle of next year, you know, the tax relief will be there for the 2026 tax season in 2027. And then you will start to see, I think, some consolidation amongst the bigger players gobbling up the smaller players. But again, it doesn't really change the idea in terms of organic market share growth or anything like that. It just really just changes the finances of the system.